Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Arborist Marketing Pros podcast. It's your host, Justin Rademacher. And as always, on this podcast, we're here to help tree companies understand more about digital and ultimately help them grow. And today is kind of cool. We have a special guest. We've got Chris Phelps from Paramount Tree Service on with us. And wanted to just take a second and ask Chris some questions. Obviously, he's been in business for over 18 years, so he might know a thing or two about running a successful tree company. And so first and foremost, thank you, Chris, for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I think maybe a good place to start is if you think about heroes and their origin story. So maybe we'll talk about like how you kind of got into the tree game and what that journey's been like. So can you tell me like what got you started in the tree care industry?
Well, I always give a little story about before I even knew about tree care. I was probably, I think, 17 or so. We had a hurricane called Hurricane Isabel. That was a significant event in our area in Williamsburg, Virginia, documented as one of the worst hurricanes, even though it wasn't very heavy. It was definitely 70-mile-an-hour winds. It just, with the rain and the wind and how it hit us, it was a tough night. I remember my mom wheelchairing my grandma from room to room, and trees were just crashing left and right. I'd stand on the porch and I'd say, that tree's about to go, and never even once knew that I'd actually be in the tree care industry. I'll never forget that. I just always think that that's ironic, and just what I actually experienced before I knew anything about trees, and then what I do today. It's a very traumatic event when trees hurt people, property, or anything like that. So I really started probably, I think it was May of 2006 was my inception, but I started lawn care. I just got a couple mowers, and I worked at a restaurant, and that gentleman owned some rental properties and said, I need someone to cut grass. And so I started cutting grass and learning how to landscape and lawn care and mulch. And about 5 years into it, I was pretty serious and started, learning more about my industry. College was paid for. I was able to pay for it with cutting grass. And the next thing I knew, I had a situation, and that was, I had $100,000 in gross receipts, or do I try and go look for a job? And I just continued with my lawn care landscape. And then I met a gentleman named Henry West, because I'd always have customers ask, hey, do you know anyone who could stump grind? So Henry is an old retired tower guy. He had a Henry's tower business. He would climb towers with a crew, and they'd go up 300, 400, 800, 1,000 feet to go change light bulbs. Those crazy guys.
Yeah.
He knew rigging, and he just was a very smart individual. And Henry took me under his wing and started talking to me. He had always called me governor. Say, governor, when I would do something, and he'd give me, his explanation. And he was just an overall great guy. Matter of fact, his son is in the tree care industry now, Reggie West. He's out of Richmond, Virginia, and he's an arborist and soon to be a registered consulting arborist as well. And so he passed it on to his family, and he passed a little on to me. Unfortunately, Henry passed away about 11 years ago, maybe 12 years ago from a brain tumor, but wonderful man. He did a lot of great things for a lot of people. So that's kind of that a little bit in a nutshell.
And so you're sort of running your own landscape company, right? And do you have people working for you, or is it just you?
No, I definitely did. I had up to 3 people working at the time. So I worked really hard. I'd have 2 to 3 people help me in the morning, and we would start 6 to 7 in the morning and go until 2 or 3. And then they'd get off work, and I'd still continue. I'd get the golf course crew from a local neighborhood that was here on agriculture visas, kind of working for the golf course. So they'd be done at the golf course around 3. So then I'm going out with the second crew. And with those guys, we could knock out almost 2 jobs versus for every one that we did in the day. And that's kind of what really helped propel me. They're a great group of guys from Mexico. They still somewhat come back from time to time, a little older because, it was a while ago, but we just, for the first 7, 8 years, it was just that grind. My wife had to just kind of go through a lot and just understand of, hard work, 6 to 6, 7 to 7. It was difficult in the hot summer Virginia sun too. Sometimes it could be very difficult, 100, 110 degrees.
Yeah. I mean, so when you were talking about hurricanes, obviously I'm based in Port Orange, Florida, which is down near Daytona Beach area.
Yeah.
So I can totally identify with, I think you used the word trauma that comes along with some of the hurricanes. And I can also identify with the heat. And it seems to be like the perfect storm when you have a hurricane that knocks out power for a week in the middle of the summer and you're just suffering, man. So I can relate to you there. I'm really interested in the evolution from, landscape to tree company. And because I've talked to people in the past that have made that similar step. And one of the things that I'm curious about is what were the gotcha moments, or what were the first things that you realized going from landscape where you've had sounds like you had some people working for you and now you're like, all right, we want to focus on trees. What was the big obstacle to get into that change of industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So believe it or not, you could almost say Paramount Tree is a fledgling company. Technically, in my 18-year career, we really didn't fully make the switch 100% to trees until about 6 years ago. So that was around COVID, the start of COVID. I actually made a decision to start going full-fledged with trees. So I had a great landscape following. I had well over 50 annual customers. We probably had over $500,000 in revenue. We were doing everything. I was doing everything from fertilizing and spray and chemical to mulching to planting plants to trimming bushes and trimming trees and mowing lawns. We were full service landscape on top of doing tree work at that time. And so I started really getting into the trees around, I believe it was 2012. We had what was called Hurricane Irene. Somehow the eyes get us. But Hurricane Irene is the one where I did it with Henry. Henry and I worked the whole week together. And I realized, wow, I actually enjoy this. I like this. I didn't enjoy the storm portion and that, but I enjoyed helping the people. There was decent money, we were doing good, and we were safe. And I was like, well, because landscaping could be a lot of hard work. Landscaping is a lot of different services I just mentioned, and different apparatuses and equipment and knowledge. And just, you had to kind of, for a 3-4 man crew, it was a lot to kind of do. And towards COVID, I was like, and then finally somewhere around COVID, I let all the customers know that I'm going to go full steam with tree work. I recommended a good company that I was friends with to do their lawn care maintenance, purchased all the big machines, did a $250,000 investment in machines for tree work. And so here to this day, we will do commercial landscape. We'll plant plants. We have a couple grant projects for some plants that we're doing and stuff like that. We do a little sod. But as far as drainage, chemical applications for fertilizer and mowing and some of that stuff, it was a huge leap. And it's very hard to tell, customers, and you have $500,000 in revenue and you're basically giving it up. So at a second point in my life, not only when I was younger, made a leap of faith of being a business owner, in my career, I did another leap of faith and I was like, all right, we're going to go full steam trees. And then equipment investment, the crew was on board. So I was lucky. I had a great crew. I have a crew from 12 years ago that are still, stuck around with me. So the crew was excited on, going to trees as well because they liked it. They liked the cookie cutter. They liked that there was a scope of work. They liked the fact that, at the end of the day, they put in a good days of work, hard work, but it's pretty straightforward and it was meaningful. Not that landscape isn't, it's just a little mundane.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. I think you really highlighted something that wasn't lost on me, which is, taking that leap of faith. And, for a lot of people that are going to be listening to this, they've made that leap of faith, to starting a business, or maybe they're like halfway in that process of starting the business. And, although I'm not in the trees, I can understand that, the stress and anxiety and the fear that comes along with, hey, telling all of your customers that really have been supporting you. And, if you're like me, your business is providing the lifestyle for your family and saying, hey, we're going to pivot and go into a different direction. And so if you're talking to somebody that, whatever the circumstance may be, maybe they're doing their own thing part-time and they haven't really committed to making the jump to doing it for themselves, what would you say to somebody to get them to, A, is it a good idea to make that leap? And then B, what would be some words of encouragement that you would have or some experience to actually make the leap to taking that risk?
So everything is a calculated risk, whether it's business, whether we're spending money on marketing, whether we're, hiring an employee, everything is a calculated risk. Even, the tree work is the easy part sometimes, but that's a calculated risk as well between crane picking, pruning, and rigging. So the risk is something that a person or a company has to judge themselves. And there's going to be some good risks and bad risks, but at the end of the day, as I said, you're talking about risk. So I would obviously say, don't be scared. You can always, one thing that I've told myself is I've told you guys a little bit about my roots, and I always still to this day, I'll be 40 in January. I still say, I was the one who started this. I was the one digging trenches for $7 an hour. I was the one who, learned educational background in landscape and horticulture. And it was me at the end of the day. And I can always go back to my roots of working in the hands or being by myself. So as long as you have something to fall back on, then the opportunity is endless, in my opinion. So it's always good to try something. I've tried many different tactics of moving forward. Some worked, some didn't. And then if they didn't, I still came back to a spot where I was. It's almost like we'll run out and test this spot on a piece of wood to see if it'll break or not. And if I hear it crack, I'll run back. Very similar. I know it's a crazy, comparison, but that's kind of how I've done it in 18 years. I'll run ahead, try something out. If it did well, then I'll branch out and go again. If it didn't, or I felt like I was going to fall, I'd run back and recenter myself to something I know that works.
100%. And also we're young men. I think that our society sort of has this idea that you have to have it all figured out by the time you're 25. And if you don't have it figured out by then, I still
don't have them figured out. Trust me, I'm trying it every day. And that's going to be the thing. I try and tell some employees that, some young 23, 24, 25-year-olds, we're at a point, and I believe in our society, just as the American culture and the American worker in general, don't get, I still don't know everything. Don't be too cocky like you have it, especially tree care industry, because that will get you hurt really bad. Don't go on autopilot and just don't assume, and always try something new and always have your bearings. Because I would never want to make that phone call or go see someone and say your significant other or what have you is hurt. That's something that we don't want. So it's a very serious game. And for 20-year-olds, we try and reiterate that as best as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Safety. And, you're never too young to continue to learn. Or rather, you're never too old to learn something new, I think. And
yeah.
So thinking about going back to, business growth, what do you think were some key strategies that you implemented that you think really helped your companies?
Investing in education. I never stopped learning. I did the CEUs. I got certifications. And what kind of propelled me, I had a little incident when I would say probably 7 years in. I did a job for a customer, and we had it all written up, but they just didn't like the way it looked, I don't think. And they threatened to sue me because they just weren't happy. They were a young couple. So they threatened to sue me, take me to court, this and that. The guy actually had his mom call me and said, if you don't give us some money back, we're going to blast you on Facebook. And that was very disheartening because I'm a young man, just have a new family. I'm working really hard, and I had no ill intention. It was a $7,000 project in 2011, 12, or 13, somewhere around that time. It wasn't anything where I was running to the bank, and it just, unfortunately, my vision, their vision, it didn't mesh, but on paper, that's what we said. And so after that, I said, if I were to be taken to court, I don't have any credentials. I can't go in front of the judge and say, this is just from what I've learned. I'm not going to say I learned it on YouTube or anything like that. So it really made me a little nervous. So I started researching, and I researched colleges. I researched Virginia Tech, Penn State, Cornell, even University of Georgia, just to see what was out there. There's not a lot out there. There's a lot for agriculture, farming, golf course management, stuff like that. But there was a place, and that place is Rutgers University in New Jersey. So when I was about 30, 31, this was approximately 2015 or so, 15, I discovered a program for landscape management and public grounds management where it was certificate courses offered through the university. And they taught everything from ethics and public grounds management to soils, to drainage, to plant identification, to soil biology, to soil structure. And it was these like 20 classes encompassed. And I took 2.5 years and traveled from Williamsburg, Virginia to Brunswick, New Jersey, a 5.5-hour drive, 2 days a week for 2 years. My wife let me do this. And I just made this commitment that education is going to, win and at the end of the day. So the education portion is the biggest thing that I can say. Know your industry, understand it. And then in our industry, arboriculture, realize that things change.
I'm doing the math here, and we're talking 9 years ago, right? 9-10 years ago ish. And so you had already been in business for 8 years. Were people saying that you were crazy for going back to school and doing all this when you've already had a business that's obviously, doing some good numbers and you're successful? What was that like?
It's hard. I have local companies here that we're all friends. We're all roughly the same age. And the thing that I got the most was, well, if you're happy and you're doing it for yourself, then I guess that's okay. And I really wanted to kind of reach out to them and said, I'm doing it for something bigger. I'm doing it for our community. I'm doing it to further the business. It's not just for me, but, people get really nervous with education or learning new things. And that's difficult. Some just want to say, well, I don't need all of that education. And there's many different instances. One of them is like OSHA. Whenever I talk to anybody about OSHA, they tense up really quickly and they're like, I'm safe. Usually the first thing out of their mouth, and it's like, I'm sure you're safe. But the thing is there's some things that could make you safer. And there's some things that OSHA kind of puts out there for free so you know about it, and it will help the overall workplace. I'm not saying they're coming for an inspection, and I'm not saying they're going to see you tomorrow, but people get really nervous about it.
Yeah. OSHA gets a bad reputation, and I can, personally, I've known arborists, I've known tree guys that have had pretty significant injuries that probably with additional education could be prevented or avoided. So it's really interesting that we're talking about, education and how you have said that it's one of the biggest changes or investments that you've made into your business. Switching gears a little bit, how important is local marketing, and what kind of approaches have you taken that have been successful? And if you have any that you felt like were a complete waste of time and money, feel free to talk about those as well.
Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy. Over 18 years and how I started. I really started off, I was that guy in a car putting newspaper flyers in the newspaper boxes. I mean, I've probably put thousands in boxes, and they actually did pay off. I think at one time I calculated maybe a 1% return on every flyer that I did, which wasn't too bad at the time for being so young. And then it kind of evolved through the years. I definitely did some magazine ads, magazine ads. But the best one is honestly, at the end of the day, going to be the word of mouth. I know everybody says it, but just to highlight some things, I've done TV ads, I've done radio. I did a whole radio segment this year. In the past 3 years, I've really done Facebook and kind of doing that. And then the past 5 years, really Google. Google is probably the number one that pays off if you know how to do your search engine or your SEOs, understanding Google's rhythm, Google's derivatives and all of those. I've had a friend kind of walk me through it. If I get 100 images or 100 reviews, and try and get your rank up a little higher. I have 5.0 in reviews out of 30 reviews. So some of those things, and then really putting in some keywords. So Google is a whole other thing, and I'm still understanding that because I'm not a professional, but I've gotten enough information to boost a little bit and move from there. Facebook, I'm trying to understand. I have a really good friend in California, and this is all he does. So he calls me for arborist advice, and he gives me some advertising advice. But I have a really good guy. His name is Micah Miller with Easton Outdoors. And Micah is now a really good spokesperson for the Contractor Connection. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but they're a very cool podcast going on. Micah has an outdoor pond, company. He installs extravagant landscapes and ponds. He just did one for Shaquille O'Neal in Georgia down there, and he's based out of Pocosin, Virginia. And he's really taught me a lot of marketing as well. And basically what we're finding is, your TV ads and your radio and the wraps on your truck and the pictures, that's all going to be kind of like after the fact of building your website. Your website is really the first place to go. So if you don't have a good website into place, then, that's really where you should put your money, in my opinion. And I have put my money in my website about 3 years ago, but it's kind of out of date and I need to update it with more pictures, more videos, more blogs. So there's some more stuff that I see that I could do on it. But for right now, I'm happy because I'm moving forward. But content is what I understand that kind of needs to happen. These podcasts. So, the radio was kind of just one of those things where I had some money for advertising, and it paid off. I think it paid off more from that radio owner giving me work for his rental properties than actual people calling me. So I know that's kind of funny, but that's how I feel. But it wasn't a huge drop in the bucket. I spend money. I have budgets for it. And, I'll get my nieces calling me or family saying, hey, can I sponsor a softball team or soccer team? So I set aside that. But when it really truly comes down to it, gaining leads and understanding where your work comes from, it's going to be the word of mouth. I have a lady, and I don't mean to take too much time, but I have a lady, I picked up a check from her. We did a crane job, and she's like, I called you. I did the research. I found out the reason you're here is professional. And we've had other companies, but they're not professional. They take days to do the job. They don't return the phone calls. They leave a mess at the end of the day trying to get a 1-day job done in 4 days, and they're just not prepared. And if they're not prepared, they possibly aren't safe, in my opinion. She said all this to me, and I was like, wow, I feel like I made it.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, to your point, I think that, first of all, let's level set. And I 100% agree that word of mouth advertising is the absolute best advertising. And I think that any good advertising campaign, we get lost in thinking about, well, I spent X amount on Facebook and I got 5 leads and I sold 1 job, right? And so in our minds, we say, hey, Facebook got me 1 job. But to what you're saying is we're not always considering that 1 job might turn into a word of mouth for a second, to a third, to a fourth. And that's true for all the advertising channels. And the absolute best way to get good word of mouth is just to do good work, show up on time, price fairly, and, communicate properly with the customer. And that takes all of your advertising dollars and just increases your return by just doing good work. You mentioned the Google reviews. It's almost like I coached you through this. It's like, the Google reviews are so, I'll use the word paramount. They are paramount because, with Google and the way that they rank everybody, when you type in tree service, Google reviews, your website quality, all the things that you listed off are absolutely contributors. Now, as somebody that does this day in and day out, unfortunately, Google never comes out and tells you, hey, here are the 5 things that you need to do. It's kind of like people like me, people, in the industry that kind of have to do a bunch of testing and figure out, okay, this is working. Let's double down on this. But at the end of the day, Google's job is to show good content when people are searching. So you hit the nail on it from my perspective, which is prioritize content above all else, whether it's podcasts, videos, and that works across social and across your website, making sure that your rankings are good there. And while we're on the topic of technology, are there any systems in place that you're using? I know there's a bunch of different like CRMs for our industry, like Jobber. Are you using anything like that that's been beneficial?
Yeah, so I'm actually using an estimating software that's Treezy. So I'm using Treezy, which is from A Plus Tree out in California. They were the ARB Pro, but it's pretty much my estimating software. But basically, it has all the capabilities of Jobber or what was the other one? Site
Arbor Gold. There's
Single Ops.
well, which one is it?
Single Ops.
Single Ops.
Yeah. So, it's similar. So, it's a very simple, program. It's more on the scientific tree inventory side, but, all of that is come about in the industry, and these guys are doing a good job and they're trying to keep up. But I think the future is, from what I understand, the future is you and I could possibly have an estimate and we go into the metaverse and you show me your tree at your house and I'll show you how to cut it. Yes. So I've heard about that, and that's the future. We don't have to go to job sites anymore and do estimates. We'll be able to, I put some Apple goggles on like 2 weeks ago and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much that could be done with these things. So I fully believe going into the next 20 years, it's going to be a different realm. So people are going to want to be more hands-on. They're going to want to have possibly avatars. They're going to want to see what you can do. Or some people at the end of the day, they've done enough research to know they're like, I want Chris on the property. I want to know that Chris is here and his crew is here and he'll take care of the rest.
Yeah, 100%. Reputation is everything. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how technology plays out in our industry. We're having a great conversation. I want to make sure that I'm considerate of your time. I do have a couple of closing questions or things that I think are going to be impactful for the people watching this. And one of those is, want to understand, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you're thinking about the growth of your business? Like, what were some of the roadblocks, the gotcha moments, and maybe how you overcame them?
Yeah. So good question. I think I mentioned one earlier in the podcast. That was kind of the education and moving forward and not feeling like I was a true professional when I was kind of molding myself. Some others are employees and trying to, handle people that work for you, because at the end of the day, the people are a representation of you, the owner, and your company. It's always been tough to find good help, and then, trying to keep them around or make them happy or understand that they possibly could go off and do something that they're passionate about. And as a business owner, you have to, and a person, just understand that they're going to better themselves too. And you can't be selfish saying, oh, well, I don't know why they didn't stay with me. I take care of them. You probably do take care of them, but they had a better opportunity and you got to let them go. So employees, and then I would have to also say, technology, changing. I did a lot of hard work with some machines that were older or outdated, and there were newer machines. The one that I could think of is aeration when I was landscaping. Now they have these aerators you stand on and they're putting holes in the ground so fast, and you don't have to turn that drum and break your back and chase this drum around a lawn looking like a crazy man. Over a 20-year period, I could see technology have changed, and it's going to change. But the technology coming that is going to change is going to need people to work on that as well. So we're finding in tree care, these $700,000 million grapple trucks and these $100,000 chippers, they fail as well. And then it's big money to fix them. So simple, keep it simple, stupid, KISS. The KISS philosophy that NASA always kind of, said, try and keep things simple. Don't get too crazy, and know your customer and know if you actually need, the machine. So those are like 3 things that I think along the way I could see have made things challenging.
Makes total sense. First of all, I thought that my dad was the one that came up with the KISS, the keep it simple, stupid. So I just learned that it was NASA. But, secondly, even in our side of the industry, one of the things that people are afraid of is AI, right? Being this new technology that's going to take people's jobs. But what I always am telling people is that it's not going to necessarily, sure, it might take some jobs when you think about like content creation, but it's the driver of who's going to be utilizing the AI. That's really the new skill that people have to use. And it sounds like, obviously in our industry, the new equipment that comes out, people are going to need to know how to operate that equipment, and it's just going to lead to more efficiency. That's what technology always seems to do.
Yes.
What's one piece of advice you wish you would have received when you were just starting out that you could give to somebody else?
I would probably, I didn't have to spend money on a lot of things that I did. A good example, I have a guy, Tony Richmond. He's my friend for a long time. And he's just one of those old souls that is, you just never going to find the wisdom again. And he says, Chris, if I could add up a lot of the money that you've spent on stuff that you didn't just to make you feel better, you could have saved some money. And I think he was right. But, at those times I made feeling decisions, so I don't regret them. But I do know that money has been spent on stuff that was not necessary.
I mean, heck, I'm in the same boat. I get that. But it's almost like, you're earning your stripes, right? Like you have to kind of waste some money to be like, okay, well, maybe I could have did this a little bit more, scrappy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. What's next for you? Like, what's the future look like for Paramount? What's on the radar for you guys?
So Paramount is growing. So we definitely have hired on an arborist and a forester. His name is Graham. He's also our PCIA CTSP, which is their certified tree safety professional. 2024 was the year of safety. I got OSHA 30. Graham got CTSP. So we've created safety training books. We've created a vehicle training program. We've created a handbook for Paramount. So now when people come into the company for Paramount, we're set up to where it's like training, understanding things, documenting them, having at least meetings every 10 days, trying to do tailgate meetings every morning. And everyone does that kind of stuff anyways when they walk a job, and they look at irrigation boxes, lighting fixtures, limbs hanging up that we call widowmakers or headaches, just different stuff like that. So we inherently already do safety briefings, but a little more extensive. So Paramount is going to be on the playing field of Davy and Bartlett and other larger companies that are doing commercial work. We already do the work for these guys. They've entrusted us because they know that we have a commitment to safety. We have arborists on staff for, the proper prunings or, doing things right. So I fully see Paramount growing and being a leader in Virginia, especially in like the Hampton Roads region from Virginia Beach to Richmond. I probably would have 10 to 15 employees in the future. For Chris personally, I have a couple things that I'd want to do, and that's I'm close to becoming a registered consulting arborist with American Society Consulting Arborist, and then I'll take the big exam for ISA, which is going to be a board certified master arborist. So I have a couple things on the horizon as well, but Paramount is moving in directions. We have some nice equipment that we bought that is paid for. That's the key. You can buy equipment, but what's the sweat equity? So just make sure that, it's worth it. But if you're going to build a business, having some equipment will kind of look good on the tax return for the depreciation and making you like a little bolstered. And of course, it helps the people out. So, Paramount is growing and we're just excited that we are finally being recognized as like an industry leader in our area.
Yeah. So I think probably the theme of the conversation has really been about education, and it really kind of struck me when you talked about like really you got into doing the education as a me. I want to make sure that I'm covered and I know what I'm talking about. But now it sounds like, hey, that education is actually paying dividends because now you're getting better jobs from better clientele, and you're increasing the overall value of the brand, which, man, that's phenomenal. We talked about. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The goal with that, though, is to attract people to your business and employees, because just so you know, a fact, there's 250,000 arboriculture workers in the tree care industry, which is not that much. There's probably 5 million in lawn care or horticulture or gardening. So with that being said, people don't want to just go work for anyone they don't know if they're going to get a check from, or, are not doing anything that they don't like to do. So we'll also, I have a gentleman from California in Humboldt County who's ready to come on over to Virginia and start a new life. So you're going to attract people and employees. And that's one of when we go back to the three things I said about, what are the toughest things over the 18 years, when all that kind of starts setting in place, people are going to want to come work for a company that has a commitment to safety and education and having fun too, because it's the people that are going to want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, Chris, a ton of information, ton of knowledge. What's your service area, and how can people find you if they want to know more? Or maybe it's a homeowner that landed on our podcast somehow, and they've said, "I want these guys to do my job," or some commercial.
So we're in Williamsburg, Virginia. We service roughly about a 50-mile radius. We do some work in North Carolina sometimes, and we do travel out of state sometimes. We've done work, up and down the East Coast, but typically our service area is Richmond, Virginia to Virginia Beach, Virginia. And, you can find us at, our phone number, 757-358-9376, or on, the internet, Paramount Tree VA, and then Facebook, we're there, Paramount Tree Services. So kind of just all over the place.
Well, Chris, again, a ton of knowledge. I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. If anybody's listening, they have questions, you just heard how to get a hold of him. If you have questions for us on the marketing side, you know how to get a hold of us, arboristmarketingpros.com. Links to our website and contact details are scattered amongst the internet everywhere. So feel free to reach out. And Chris, it's been great. Appreciate having you on.
All right. Thanks again.